Hello, good morning.
Good
Welcome to We'll Sleep
morning.
When We're Dead.
Welcome to We'll Sleep When We're Dead. Happy Memorial Day.
Oh my gosh, and it's literally we're actually recording on Memorial Day.
How fun.
Rainy, cold New York Memorial Day.
Well, I can tell you, I know you get our weather like 2 to 3 days later, and it's coming. The sun
I
is coming.
we see this in our 10-day forecast and New York we've had very cold and then we've had these 2 days, a couple 2-day stints, but it's all the way in the 90s. So we've actually not seen 75 yet. And I feel like that's what's
That's our
coming, right?
day today. It's like 75 and sunny out there right now. It's incredible. So
Oh,
I'm
can't
looking
wait.
forward to it. I'm looking forward
Can't
to
wait.
running around. Well, I can't wait for this weather, but I also can't wait for our guest.
I know. We have a returning guest, which I don't know. I say this in the episode too. It feels so big for We'll Sleep When We're Dead.
It feels big and it also feels very right because
If we need a
Mel,
returning
I
guest,
feel
it's
like
her.
we walked out of our last podcast recording with Mel, and the only thing that I could equate it to is that emoji with like the exploding head
Yeah.
where you're like, it was like too much for me to process. I
hmm
almost feel like that coming out of this one too. I think we went deep on a topic that we know is super relevant to all of you because we hear it from you
Yeah.
all the time. And Mel has just like amazing frameworks for how to think
hmm
about things. Like she's not going to give you the answer because the
No.
reality is like the answer is going to be very individual dependent on each of
hmm
you, but she's going to give you the tools to actually think and process like what might work best for you, which is cool.
It's so great. And I actually felt like the last time I didn't have like a whole lot to chime into because it was a little bit more like work because she's like her brand is work mom, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
this one was a little bit more of the in-between mom, and I,
Yeah.
feel like I even took a lot away. I don't know, I question sometimes, like,
Yeah.
what is my purpose as a stay-at-home I don't know. It was wonderful. It was so wonderful. Also, highly recommend if you're, like, truly not sure, like, just, like, spend an hour or 2 with her because that's, like,
Yeah.
also what we get into of just, like, people need to give themselves time to think, and the way that
Yep.
she, like, helps you process is really wonderful.
Yeah. So we're going to link all of her information at the end of this. If you want to put that on, I need you to go ask daddy. Okay. Okay. You want your brother to help you? Okay. Go ask him and I'll be done in a minute. If we decide to keep this in, that's the most relatable thing. We're home on a holiday weekend and yeah, dad's downstairs,
Yeah, they
everyone.
just bypassed dad.
Dad is downstairs. He could perfectly help to get that Glinda dress on right now, but
Linda.
she needed to come in here. She wouldn't allow me to close the door to my office because generally I close it and lock it when I'm on calls or this podcast. But she's like, I just want you to leave it open a crack in case I need to tell you that something happened. And I'm like,
The
your dad is downstairs. No, we can't. We
No, we
can't
can't.
possibly.
No, I have no words.
No. So, anyways, all that I was going to say is we're going to link Mel's info in the show
Yep.
notes. And I'm like, I know we've had a couple of listeners reach out to her and start working with her one on one. I would highly recommend it. I think we talked
Totally.
about it last time, but this idea of investing in yourself, there's like no better time to do it.
Mhm.
It's been so funny. The last episode where we talked about all of those career pivots, changes, and like when women do it has been something that people have been obsessed with. And
Yeah,
so I think it's like a perfect time to spend the time investing in yourself to answer some of those questions.
100%. And also, please like and subscribe to our stuff. I hate saying it over and over and over, but it's working. And so I want to remind you if we looked at all of our numbers, it's not equivalent. Like the Instagram and the listener, all of that is not the same. So if you are following us, maybe go on Spotify or Apple and subscribe to us. And if you're only doing that, maybe go follow us on Instagram. It's so, so helpful. And I hate to be the one to always ask, but I'm just going to do it because you know what? People that have really popular podcasts ask. And so I'm going to ask. So please, and share this one too. This one is a really good share with a work mom friend. Like truly, I think that would be like wonderful.
Amazing. Well, we hope you enjoy.
Okay.
Thanks.
Welcome to We'll Sleep When We're Dead. We are so happy.
Welcome.
We have a returning guest, which feels so big for We'll Sleep When We're Done.
You're
Like,
the first returning guest, Mel.
yeah.
This is like this feels like big time.
We have
So I'm
Mel
so excited.
Goodman. Thank you so much for coming back. Mel Goodman from Work Mom. We had you on now what was that, like 5 months ago? 6
Yeah.
months ago, maybe? 4
I
anyway.
think it was earlier this year. Yeah,
Yeah, a
January
while
or
back, I
February,
think, like,
maybe?
right? Yes, and we love when our listeners reach out to us, and we get a lot of weekly reach outs, but Mel, yours, like, really hit home with so many people. We talked
Mm.
so much about, like, the mental load. It was really just, like, this amazing not, like, catch-all, but, like, really kind of was. We covered so much. And so we're so happy to have you back because we want to kind of dive deeper into other things, not so much like the mental load. We have some other questions for you, but people that wrote into us were just like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to hear. Or I'm struggling so much with it all. Or I'm working and I think all the time about stopping, but I don't know how to do it. And it was so lovely for us at We'll Sleep When We're Dead because we've started this podcast and we don't really know where it's going. And I love how many people are reaching out to us about this specific topic. Like we weren't really preparing for that. We kind of just thought we'd
Yeah.
always chat with like the working mom, the stay-at-home mom. And now we have this audience that's really chatting about like, wait, what there's more out there. So anyway, you're back to helpfully chat with us about all of that stuff. So thank you so much for being here again.
I am so thrilled to be here, of course. I can't wait to dive
Well,
in.
and it's so funny, Mel, because I have now, as you know, because I've sent people your way, there have been so many times where I'm like, oh, that's something that you're dealing with. Here's a link to an episode where you can go really deep on it. Because
Yeah.
it's been, I mean, time and time again that I've talked with people, and I love looking at the insights and the metrics as a marketer. And so I keep sending Mel a note being like, we have 40 something episodes and you're still in our top 10 episodes. And I think it's just because it's something that people relate to so much. So your work is so, so important. And we're excited to kind of dive into a different facet today.
Awesome.
So, yet again, I think I will start with the fact that I still think your LinkedIn quotes are like life-giving.
Yeah.
I think all of that LinkedIn content is just so good. I resonate with it so much and I love when you post it. But I obviously knew what we were talking about this week. And I think this quote that I pulled, I think you maybe posted this yesterday or the day before, where you said most senior level moms are making the biggest decisions of their life while carrying the most weight they've ever carried. And that struck a chord so deeply with me specifically, and I know with our audience, because there's just like a lot of balls in the air all the time. And that, obviously relates back to our earlier conversation about mental load, but it's so interesting in the context of all these dialogues that we're having with our friends, with listeners that are speaking to like, am I actually making the right decision in this like current life stage that I'm in? And so that quote resonated so deeply. And also, to use as a jumping off point, we had a listener reach out this week. Especially, I talked last week about how I've been having like lots of dialogues with Claude because, I have a lot of things that I'm thinking about and whatnot. And she said, I have literally made Claude my personal life coach to reconcile with my constant oscillation between wanting to continue working, leading, building equity versus the constant feeling of we'll never get these years back and I should take a pause, and the reality of both. And so it was interesting because when we were thinking through like what could of the many, many topics we could dive into with you on this, I think this constant question, this ball juggling, this like oscillation that a lot of women at our life stage are having right now because of where we are in our careers or whatnot, it feels like the answer has to be like very black or white. It's like you have to make a choice one way or the other. And when we reached out to you about this, you were like, this is perfect because I think this framework is a bit outdated and you have like a new way of thinking about it. So that's kind of the jumping off point. We can see where the convo goes from here, but I would love to get your perspective on not only that comment you made on LinkedIn and what you're seeing, but also our listeners' comment as well.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is the topic of the moment, truly, among so many in corporate right now, particularly at Fortune 500 companies where they're experiencing so much stress. I'm hearing about so many women that are taking stress leaves right now at bigger companies, and also women that are just questioning their careers, whether that's life stage, where they're at in their career, personal life. Just so many of us are questioning their careers. And the quote that you noted is one of the most important things to consider as you are considering a shift in your career. And the reason why is because, just to go back to that quote, essentially what you're saying is senior level moms are caring more than they can see, and they're making decisions from underneath all of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason why this is important to talk about is because I think oftentimes when we're so miserable in our situation, we want to get out really fast. And we actually, in order to make a sound decision, we need to slow down and first stabilize the load that we're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the 4 loads of motherhood is part of that conversation, right?
Yeah.
So the most important thing that you can do initially before you actually kick off the topic of where you're at in your career is untangling everything that you're carrying first so that you can actually make decisions from a clear mindset.
Yeah.
Because if you're just going into a career shift and thinking about what your career can look like when you are drowning in all the loads that we've talked about, you're likely going to make a decision that you regret a couple years later. And then you'll be back at square one. And I've seen this time and time again. I've had a lot of women actually reach out to me recently saying that they have made a decision. They didn't go through, a framework or a formula or a process to make that decision. And a couple months in, they're already regretting it and wondering if they should have made a different decision. That's what I really like to help women prevent, because otherwise it's a waste of time, right? It's a waste of time to go through it. And so, to your point, a lot of women think that they only have 2 options. And that's what keeps them stuck in this binary mindset.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those 2 options are either to stay or to leave. That's it, right? Would you agree that that's
all
really what
I've ever thought about framing it? And that's the only dialogue like Sam and I feel like we've had with like other friends and whatnot. It's very binary for sure.
Yes.
And
I
it
think
feels, it
go
feels
ahead.
kind of like why we started this podcast, but it feels kind of like a trap almost. Like, how do you make such a black and white decision if I'm always like that voice to Lucy being like, remember what you're getting yourself into if you choose this. But how do you know if you're not given that opportunity? But if you go take that opportunity and you still have that career desire, you're constantly worried that you're not going to get that back. And so it just feels like this trap. And I never want to, all those years that Lucy and I chatted before the pod, I never wanted to sound super negative, but I was just like, you really need to know what you're getting yourself into, because last week we chatted about like stay-at-home mom truths. And I was like, I think everybody needs to be a stay-at-home mom for like 6 months to a year. Just because they can really like understand. And so it's exciting to know when we get into that it's not so binary, because when it feels that way, it is so scary. Like
100%. 100%, especially for those that have invested in their career for, 10, 15 years. And they've identified with their career for as long as they can remember. That's the identity load, right? But then also, especially as a senior leader or in any senior role, you also are probably factoring in equity, your comp, your healthcare, everything that you rely on right now for your family. And that's a huge decision as well, in addition to the identity load of, whoa, what does it mean if I'm not this VP or this executive, or even just, even in corporate anymore? What does this mean for my identity? How do I go to a dinner party when somebody asks me, what do I do? How do I answer that? Right. And so that can be tough. Right. Okay. So what I want to share is there's actually 12 options.
I know you're going to break it down for me in bite-sized chunks, but it feels like a lot of paths.
There are a lot of paths. But the whole reason why I think that this is exciting to share is exactly what we were talking about, because we all think that there's just 2 options. And that's such a limiting perspective. You're right. It can feel overwhelming when you see or hear about 12 options. They're actually categorized into 6 different clusters. So I'm happy to walk through what these clusters are, or I can give you some ideas of what some of these options are, if that's helpful. But we'll also hone in on the listener who sent you a message, and I can help walk through some ideas for that specific listener as well, because I imagine that's probably what you're seeing most right now is like, what's the difference, how can we bridge the gap between stay at home and, being in corporate?
Interject for 1 second.
Of course.
Before we get into this, because I'm so excited, I don't want to like interrupt after we're into it.
Yeah.
I just still find what you said so powerful about taking a breather and not making a decision when you're overwhelmed and you're like, so I think that sometimes where I come out as a stay-at-home mom and be like, I have no ability to empathize with a working mom and corporate VP, but at the same time, it is such a good moment. And you guys don't have enough time. Like Lucy doesn't have enough time to just like daily think like this, but it is like, well, what is it is it that you only want time with your kids? Okay, that I guess is like a black and white fix. Or is it that you need to be willing to say yes to outsourcing more, or you need to stop saying no? Like I do like that for a minute. Like that really hit me hard of being like, because I've thought that way of like, why do I struggle so much as a stay-at-home mom? Is it the boredom? Is it the loneliness? Like it kind of can go both ways of like what is it? What's the root problem? And is the fix actually quitting? Because I don't think those are tied. I just found that really powerful as I'm listening to you. Like, yeah, we're not given enough time to think about what is it that we're fixing by quitting
That's right.
or going. So anyway.
No, it's a really important point to stop at, actually. I can briefly share, I think it's number one, to your point, so important to have the space, which is really hard to find. But the way that I do it is it's all in private podcast format. So all of the content is delivered so that they can listen to it on the go, right? So that's really important to have that space. But you want to first identify what it is that you are prioritizing. You want to look at all 4 loads and get clear on which load is the one that's taking up most of the space, and how do we affect change around that. Then we want to identify in this next season of your life, what are you protecting, right? How do and when I was going through that process myself, I remember so clearly thinking about what I'm protecting most, which actually I think many people might be surprised about, is my marriage, is being a team, being a partnership. Because when you have that solidified as the thing that you're protecting the most, so you have so much more opportunity and potential, the two of you as a couple, and you're able to fulfill your ambition in different ways when that is the number one thing that you're protecting, right?
Mel, what do you find is that like how I'm like, that's actually surprising to me.
Yeah.
To be totally transparent. I'm like curious how often some people identify that is what they're trying to protect the most versus flexibility. And, I feel like flexibility and like having autonomy is like the number one thing I feel like I hear again and again. So I'm curious, like, is that the biggest bucket, or are there like certain areas that you find you hear the most?
Flexibility and autonomy for sure, until they really start to hear me talking about the marriage component and the partnership and the team dynamic that is so necessary to make this type of life, this dual income life work if you are a dual income home.
Yeah.
So 100% until they understand that picture, because oftentimes what I have found with those that I've been working with in my program is that they really want their husbands to be involved in this process of what they're evaluating in their career and in their life, and part of the 4-load conversation and the household responsibilities and all of that. And their husbands want to be, their partners want to be involved. They're asking for the episodes. They're asking to be in the Google Drive folder, right? But what's interesting is that they oftentimes don't know how until they're told. They want to be involved, right? But oftentimes the other partner wants to feel in control, right? And so it's about like relinquishing that control and letting them in to do the things that they really want to do, as opposed to just helping or babysitting, right?
Yeah.
And so so a big element of what I'm seeing is that they think that their partner is a bottleneck, but in fact they're not. They want to be more involved. They just don't know how. So that's been an interesting factor.
Interesting.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can jump back into the 12 loads. I just wanted to like pause on that because I thought that was like so powerful to people to just like give yourself some time to think. But jumping back into 12, but you said 6.
Yeah.
Right?
And so, well, it's 6 clusters. And part of that is like, before we even get to the option set, we don't even get into talking about options about your career until weeks in to working together, right? So they're stabilizing their load. They're figuring out what their priorities are. And part of that is, okay, what do they actually need versus what they want, right? And so figuring that out. And so by the time they get to the 12 options, they're like, I already think I know, right? What I want based on everything that I've done, right? All of that work ahead of time. So cluster 1 is about staying where you're at and redesigning. So underneath that could be staying and renegotiating. So that could look like keeping the role, but negotiating the structure, meaning the hours, whether it's remote, the scope, the travel, the comp, the title, things like that. The other option within that cluster is redefining success, which a lot of people think is a mindset shift. It's actually an option. So you're staying exactly where you are, but you're consciously choosing to stop performing the old metrics, right?
And is this outward or inward, Mel? Like, would this be like my success meant, I need to go to my boss and say, like, success now looks like this for me in this role? Or is it more so like for myself, Lucy, you achieving XYZ thing is no longer your goal?
Yeah, it's internal. It's for yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
for
I
yourself.
figured.
Although sometimes in some instances, like I'll tell you in my case and in somebody that I worked with, where it was along the lines of a promotion, right? Where I went back to Salesforce knowing I'm not aiming to get a promotion in this season of my life. I'm aiming to network, to master my leadership skills, and really just master the things that I need to know in order to build a business one day. That was my success. Those are my success metrics. And that shifted my entire philosophy around how I showed up, for my team. I didn't take on extra stretch projects, things like that, right? And I did share with my boss that in that season, I wasn't aiming for a promotion. However, at a certain point, there was an opportunity and I did want to evaluate it because it's sometimes just like in somebody's nature just to consider, right?
Yeah.
Another example is where if you're potentially a lawyer, this is somebody that I've worked with in the past where they could not handle the amount of billable hours, right, that are required to make partner. And she decided to redefine success and not have the billable hour requirement be her expectation for this season. And that might delay her partner track. And so she, I imagine, will be either sharing that with the head of the firm or not. But like, it's really, we can work through that together and determine what is the best, the best determination for your specific situation. So that's a way that you can redefine success and just take that pressure off, to give yourself permission just to it's not even slowing down. It's just to really just take the pressure off. That's really what it boils down to.
Sam's probably looking at me right now like, huh. Because as a very ambitious person myself, I think a lot of the pressure that I put on myself is truly that. It's pressure that I've put on myself, and it's not like an external evaluation of whether or not I'm meeting the objectives of my job.
100%.
I think that is I imagine that is how most women feel.
Yeah.
And
I know that's exactly how I felt.
I don't know how many of you Lucy's out there are obvious. Like, I'm speaking from not experience. How often are you like, am I meeting my objectives? Because if you would ask yourself that, it would just be a resounding yes, but you're still like aiming, you're still working so hard. So yeah. But I also find that I always think on the stay-at-home mom track, and I know that that's my only voice here, but I struggle with that with people. And I know I love that we're not talking black and white anymore. And that is not just stay or go. But these women that have these ambitions that it's like me when I work out. I can't, I'll go into every workout and be like, don't try really hard. And then I'm not caring about anybody else, but my internal person is like, I'm going to kill myself before I don't make my PR on this half marathon. Even though 4 minutes before I started, I was like, I'm going to take it easy today. And I just think as a stay-at-home mom, when you've been trained in the working world to like have that inner ambition, then all of a sudden you stay at home and you're like, wait a second, there's no promotions. There's no people telling me every quarter that I'm doing a good job. Like, I can imagine it being very stark and hard because as a stay-at-home mom, like I am the evaluator of my progress every single day and that nobody is telling me I'm doing a good job. I love that we're reframing this because I think that would be a really hard, like to go from one to the other quickly. Yeah.
Without a doubt. And something for you, Sam, that you could consider is, what does a successful day look like for me?
Oh yeah. When I was thinking, when you were talking, I have all these rules. I'm not going to watch Bravo during the middle of the day. I can't do that. And now I'm like, I've folded laundry. I've done literally 15 tasks. I have an hour before pickup. I'm going to watch Summer House and I'm not going to beat myself up about it because I have done so many things. But like that's all internal. Nobody's out there telling stay-at-home moms that they have to get certain tasks done. Like it's completely internal. So no, I was thinking about that as you were talking.
Right. Yeah, and I'm such a fan of doing that, right? Like
Yeah.
there's why is there that stigma that you can't watch TV during
Right.
the day after you've gotten your stuff done, or even before if you need a break,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like in
Right.
between. I'm a big
Right.
fan of that. Like listen
Yeah.
to what you need.
Totally. Yeah.
So going back to the example that you shared, because I can go through all these different options and we could spend so much time on each of them, but I really want to make sure that we cover the one that you were talking
Yeah.
about, right? That like in between somebody who is really thinking about just staying or leaving. What's the difference? Like how do
Totally.
I bridge the gap there?
Mhm.
And I think you had called her like the in between mom, right? And I like to consider this woman somebody who has outgrown the binary. But here's the thing. I think before we can even talk about like what's next for her, it's always about, like I said, you first want to talk about like what is she holding? You can't make a career decision inside a state of depletion. And so once you narrow in on what that depletion is, then you can start thinking about, okay, this is cluster number 4, redesigning the work itself. And there's 3 different options within this cluster. The one that aligns the most with the woman that you're talking about is building a portfolio career. Are you familiar with like the portfolio life
No.
concept?
No.
Okay. So this is where you can stay put where you're at strategically while you're building something on the side, right? Where the current role funds the next chapter, right? So it's this in between role where you can define it. You first want to identify what is work giving you, right? Let's just say that work is the thing that's funding your life and it's the financial component that you can't give up right now and you don't want to
Mhm.
give that up. Okay, so that's the purpose of work. But you might also have this mindset where you're thinking, I want to find purpose in other areas of my life too. I want to find fulfillment and purpose in other areas. Sometimes that means I want to be a stay-at-home mom, right? But sometimes it doesn't. It means that I want to be more around for my kids. I want to be more accessible, but I also want to have something else too on the side. That can look like so many different things, truly. I mean, it could mean fractional work, it could mean part time, it could mean consulting for a few hours, it can be doing something on a retainer basis, or not from a career standpoint, it could look like being on the PTA at the school, right? It could be being more involved with your kids in some way. It's about figuring out what that looks like for you and determining what's going to bring me the
Mhm.
purpose that I'm looking for in my life, while also sustaining the financial component that I need from my career, while also giving me the opportunity to be more accessible and available and present for my children. So all of that really depends on the person, but there's options, right?
Yeah.
Again, once you make that decision to stay put strategically for a very specific reason, part of that is redefining success. Okay, so now
Mhm.
that I know that I'm not going to be trying to get a promotion or I'm not trying to do X, Y, or Z at this company, I can redefine how I want to actually operate at this company because I know what
Yep.
my purpose
Mhm.
is, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so then it takes the pressure off. It takes the load off, the emotional load, the identity load, I mean, all of it. It takes it all off
Mhm.
once you just make that mental change, that mental decision.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
Okay, you said there were 3 options in there, right? Was
Yeah.
that all 3?
So the first one is building a portfolio career.
Yep.
Then fractional or consulting is another one
Got it.
where
Yep.
senior leaders or senior level work, is being worked across multiple companies on a project or retainer base. Then the other one could be part-time or job
Yep.
share, which is a really interesting one. Are you familiar with job sharing?
Yes. How prevalent is that right now? I feel like is it industry specific? I'm like so curious.
I have not seen it be industry specific. I have
Okay.
not seen it that prevalent. I've only heard a few cases of this, and I think it
Yeah.
is brilliant. And I would love for more women to know that this is possible because the more women that know it's possible, the more opportunity they'll be able to find, right? Because the part of the
Right.
problem is you're at a company and you want part-time work, but you don't know anybody else that wants that part-time work who might be a mom or even a dad, right? And
Yeah.
they want to share the job with you. It's really
Right.
great for the business. The business is getting 2 people for 1 salary,
Mhm.
essentially.
Yep.
I've seen this work a few different times. I've also seen 2 women share a job, and then several years later, they actually positioned themselves for a promotion together and got a promotion, which is so
Whoa.
awesome.
That's really badass. I love that.
Yeah.
It's really popular. Well, it's not popular, is maybe it's common but it's hard to find in the teaching world, but it's brilliant in the teaching world.
Totally.
And I always, when I was toying to go back after I had Isla, I was like, that would be my dream. Cause like I was a middle school math teacher and there's 7 periods a day. If I can find another person that would teach 1 through 3, I teach 4 through 7. I go to work from 11 to 3. I can stay home. Like it was hard to find, but I think it was much more common than the working world because it was a very defined difference. Or even like I've heard elementary school teachers and they just do like one teacher's there Monday, Tuesday, the other teacher's there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And like it actually works really well if you can find somebody that's willing to do it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious because you mentioned fractional, and I feel like in my world, that is what I see the most that women are moving towards or trying to transition into. And maybe this is where you like coach people on personalities and like the realities of like certain choices. That path seems so stressful for me because it is highly built on your network. It's a lot of like, who do you know, especially when you're getting started and jumping off. There's like a strong component of it that's like a business development piece where you're like constantly going out and trying to make sure your pipeline is filled with work. Like, are those some of the caveats that you're speaking to when you're coaching women around like, here are considerations if you go this path that you would need to think about? Because the mental load of that for me, if I were to ever consider that, like completely makes that a non-option for me.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I know that that's totally personal. I just feel like using myself as an example for this is probably the most helpful in this context, but I'm just curious like how you might coach someone on that.
Yeah. Is the thing that makes it a non-negotiable for you the fact that you're constantly needing to build pipeline? Is that the main thing?
That is like that type of work feels stressful to me.
Yeah.
And not knowing like where is it coming from in 6 months? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
That piece
Absolutely.
would feel like a pressure to me and a load.
100%. Yes. Yeah. You do need to have a certain, I don't want to say certain personality type. You want to have a personality type that is interested in that, right? In the sales aspect of it. But what would be important is to ideate on number one, what's most important to you? What's the life that you want to live? Which of these options is actually going to align with that life, right?
Right.
Number two, what are your core strengths and which of these options align with that, with your core strengths too, and what your passions are. And then once we actually think through these options together, we talk about the constraints. That one would be a constraint for you where building pipeline, selling, having to, be exposed potentially after 6 months of work. Those are constraints, but it's about defining which constraints are actually fear-driven and which ones are actually real. Right.
Well, mine
so
would
I like
always be fear driven. Pretty much every constraint you give me, I'll be afraid of. So
well,
and
understandable, right? But that's natural and normal for anyone that's making a change, right? There's always going to be fear for anyone making a shift. We just innately as humans, we don't like change, right? And we don't like uncertainty. And the uncertainty of a fractional gig like that is really high, right? So I like to visualize climbing up a mountain, right? I like to visualize like your vision is at the top. It's the summit, right? Your vision for your life is up there. And you're down at the bottom and you're starting to climb up this mountain of the life that you want to live. And along the way, you're going to run into roadblocks. It's never linear. And those roadblocks are going to have these constraints. And some of them are going to be trees that you can get around. Those are the fear-driven constraints. Or some of them are going to be these massive boulders that you have no way of even like pushing through for days and days and days, right? What I like to work with are the fear-driven constraints because there's a way around those, right? And that's really a skill that can be built. That's something that actually is in your control to shift if you really wanted that. If you really did want to go that direction, that's something that you'd be able to conquer if that's something you really, really wanted.
Yeah.
And so we always want to try to remove the fear through a lot of, a lot of it goes back to identity load, right? And emotional load and where that fear is coming from. And a lot of it is very real, right? Of course, like you have a family, you have to make sure that you have food on the table. So there is that major consideration. So it's not about abandoning that. It's about really diving deep into what those constraints are. And are you motivated to work around those constraints? or not, right? And B, do you think it's possible? What's the mindset around it? So that's how I would approach that with, around what you're sharing there.
Yeah.
The other thing though is that's the reason why I love a portfolio life initially is for the reason you shared of you still are bringing in income, right? If you're still at your company, but you're doing something on the side. I've also seen where if you end up leaving the company that you're at, I've heard of really beautiful stories where when you leave, you offer to consult for them so that there's a really natural transition and they pay you a lump sum to get started. And then in exchange for that, you can get testimonials too, right? So there's so many different creative approaches to making this work and taking the risks down a little bit. But there's always going to be risks. There are.
I know. Sam knows I'm just scared of everything. So the fact that we're even on this podcast 40 plus episodes in is really a testament to I worked around that fear tree for this one. So
that's right. And looking back to how you've conquered that gives you evidence.
Yeah.
It gives you evidence that you can do something that you're fearful
I
of
love
and
a
move
proof
through
point,
it.
Mel. I love to prove that I can do it. Okay, so Mel, I know we're not going to go through all 6 clusters because we want people to come to you and get private coaching, which we know people are doing, and we love that. Yes. That's like best case scenario in my mind. But I do feel like there might be one cluster that I don't know if it's real yet because I don't know about it. But like we've kind of talked, like using our listener example just as our proxy for today. Let's say she goes through everything in that first cluster you defined and she's like, nope, I don't actually really want to like reevaluate what success looks like here. And I don't, I that's not going to be the option. That doesn't feel great. Then she goes to this next cluster that we just talked through and she's like, well, I necessarily want to do that. I don't know that I want this portfolio career and the fractional stuff is scary. And I'm not, I'm not sure that's the path. And so is there a path where you like finally get to like, I do need to like make a choice as to like whether or not I'm fully going to leave and like fully going to go to stay at home mom, or is there nothing that like gets to that like final decision framework?
Yeah, I mean it really boils down to what they're looking for in their life right now.
Yeah.
Right? What they're prioritizing in their life right now. And
Yep.
I always want to come back to the fact that we live in seasons and chapters. And what happens in one season certainly does not need to be the case for the future season or another season in the future.
Yeah.
And and so I don't think that there's any one thing that they can say that would make me think they are ready to be a stay-at-home mom. It's the collective nature of how we work through the work together to determine, oh, well, you're not really mentioning anything related to your career, right?
Yeah.
You haven't noted anything about being in a role or wanting to fulfill your ambition in this way, right?
Yeah.
You haven't mentioned anything along those lines. And so what I try to find are the patterns and what they're sharing so that I can reflect back to them what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. And oftentimes if I'm seeing something like that where they haven't mentioned anything about their career, then that definitely points into the direction of stay-at-home mom. Oftentimes, though, they're not ready to make that decision, and they're ready, though, to take a strategic pause, right? And to have intentional time off before the next move. They're not quitting, right? And they're resetting with a plan, which could very well lead to stay-at-home mom, or it could lead to any of the other options that we've talked about.
Yeah.
But a strategic pause can be a really beautiful thing for so many women if they have that opportunity, which I know can be really rare and definitely a luxury.
Yeah.
Do you find a pattern in the mom era of these women? I'm entering into a bit of a new era of like, I almost have 3 school age kids and I'm 100% feel different than I did the first 5 years. Like those first 0 to 5 were just all consuming. And to also be building a career on top of that would be complete depletion. So these women are depleted. So are you finding it kind of just all over the map, even like people with high schoolers still questioning it? Or is it kind of in this really tough time where we're having kids older, our careers are at the middle of peaking, or they can see the light at the end of the tunnel if I just keep holding on, but then they're sad that they're missing out with their kids. Like, is it kind of in that 0 to 7 time frame?
Without a doubt. Oh my gosh, without a doubt. It happened to me when I had a 5 and a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see it with moms that have kids older. See it
Right.
with moms that have older kids. They're looking to kind of rethink their career and maybe go off on their own more, things like
Yep.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not in this kind of crisis situation where they're questioning everything because the
Right.
load is so steep. And the thing is it's because your career is growing and converging at the same exact time that your kids are needing you the most right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that enough, that, you know, your career becomes more and more senior right at the same exact time that your kids are under the age of 5. And
Right.
that can be,
So true.
Yeah.
It's so hard. It's so true.
And it's also like needing you the most. Like I was struggling with like articulating this, Mel. Like we don't know. We're all in it. We don't know what our kids are going to be like at 18, but we're all hoping we're doing our best because everybody says like you're doing this work for them to be good adults. And it's like we're all doing our best, but the 0 to 5 needing us most is also a need that is so physical that could
Yes.
drain us even more, right? Like, as we've talked to other guests on here that have older kids, and the need is still there, but it can be so much bigger, but very like smaller amounts during the day or like less quantity, literally physically less. And so it's just such a hard time because they need us a lot. But it's also
Yeah.
so physical that we sometimes don't give ourselves enough credit of like, we're mentally exhausted maybe because of our job. And then we're physically exhausted because we literally are carrying around kids. You know, we're doing all the things. So I
Yeah.
just find it it's a hard time.
it's a really hard time. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better, right? Like it's both the physical and the emotional piece of it
Mm-hmm.
because our generation is trying to do things differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to parent differently, and along the way we're reparenting ourselves. That takes a ton of emotional energy,
Right.
and it takes a lot of work. We're being super intentional, which I think is amazing, but
Mhm.
it also can take a big toll. And I think with everything going on in corporate as well, especially at these larger companies right now, and the pressure that we're all facing in corporate,
Mhm.
or that they're all facing in corporate, no longer, no longer in corporate, but in addition to the pressure that we're facing in motherhood has never been
Right.
greater. And so those two things converging at one time, it's real.
Yeah.
Man, Mel, I can't believe we're already almost up on time because I just am soaking it all in. I feel like the thing I'm going to just be ruminating on the rest of the day is the fact that you said everyone is questioning everything. And it's so true. Like, I think back to our listener and I think back to my conversations with Claude this week. Like, we're using AI to like try to have some sort of a framework for like what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
If you know, we want everyone to come work with you. If we can't get everyone that's listening to this podcast to come work with you, what is like the 1 or 2 questions that you would have someone sit with first? Just, you know, they're listening to this and they're like, wow, every single thing that they've said has resonated with me because I'm questioning everything. You know, if they could find 30 minutes for themselves, moms, I'm telling you, and moms, I'm looking at myself in a mirror, like, let's find 30 minutes for ourselves to sit with these questions. What would be those few questions that you would ask someone?
The first one is always, what do you want your life to look like and feel like? Start with that. Always. This is your one and only life, right? We shouldn't be starting with our career. The career is what helps our lives in many ways, but our life is this is it. This is all we have. We have one life. Okay. So that's the first question. The second question is, based on that, create a prioritization filter and determine, what do you actually need right now and what do you want? And the third one is, what are you protecting most right now? That will give them a bit of a foundation to get started.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's so good. I always love that we have homework when we talk to you, Mel.
I know.
It makes me so
I don't know if that's a good
happy.
thing or a bad thing, but
No, it's a great thing. Sam especially loves it as a former teacher.
I love homework and I will do it even though I don't know. I'm going to try to answer these questions for myself.
So amazing. Thank you
This
so
was
much for
so
coming
great.
and chatting with us again.
Of
I'm sure we'll
course.
bug you again in 6 months with a whole other list of topics that people are
Oh,
curious about.
well,
Yeah.
I would love it. I'm always happy to come on and chat with you too.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much. We will
you.
link everything in the show notes for you guys so that you can find more ways to work with Mel one-on-one. And we hope you have a great week.
Yes, thanks, Mel.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mel.